Okay, so segmentation or cleavage. This consists of a series of mitotic divisions that give origin to an increase in the number of cells, like what we saw in the video. And the cells, after multiplication, they multiply. If it's one cell, to divide into two cells. If it's two cells, it will be divided into 4 cells. 4 will divide into 8. 8 will divide to 16, which is morula. The 16 will divide to 32, which is blastocyst. And the individual cells inside this division, or the zona pellucida that is housing them, the individual cells are called blastomeres. After 3 divisions, the blastomeres undergo compaction. We are going to have the inner and outer cell masses. The compacted blastomeres divide to form the 16-cell morula, like we saw in the video. At days 3 and 4, after fertilization, the morula presents a cavity, blastocoel, and the blastocyst is formed. We will see that in another video. The inner cell mass forms the embryoblast and is located at one pole of the blastocyst, as I explained in the previous video. The outer cell mass surrounding the inner cells and the blastocoel forms the trophoblast. So we have the cytotrophoblast and cytotrophoblast. And the trophoblast leads to the formation of fetal membranes. Fetal membranes. Fetal membranes. Because the embryoblast will lead to the formation of the fetus. So the trophoblast will lead to the formation of fetal membranes. Because if you form the baby or the fetus, what should nourish the baby? It is the placenta. So the placenta and the chorion and the rest, that are accessory organs that will nourish the fetus or make the fetus viable or alive. We call them, so the fetal membranes is the placenta, the chorion and the rest. Chorion. They form the fetal membrane. Okay, so let's continue. So the fetal membranes are formed from the trophoblast. So the trophoblast later the trophoblast divides into syncytiotrophoblasts and cytotrophoblast. We will see later. At the time of implantation, the uterus is in the secretive phase, and the blastocyst implants in the endometrium of its anterior or posterior wall. So the blastocyst, most of the time, the implantation of the conceptors is in either the posterior or the anterior wall. You can see this is the fallopian tube, this is the uterus, the fundus of the uterus is here, then another fallopian tube, and then we come to the uterus, then the cervix, then the vagina. Okay, so cervix is here. These are the eggs, these are the fallopian tubes. Then we have, if the urnar bladder of the female is over here, then the bladder always faces the front or the anterior portion. So we call this side anterior section of the womb. Anterior. This is the anterior part of the womb. Then the back is connected to the rectum. So the rectum, the intestine, the rectum, which leads to the anus. So if it is implanted here, they call it what? Posterior wall. So this is the posterior wall of the uterus. And this is the anterior wall of the uterus. Uterus is the same as womb, Uterus is the same as womb. The same as womb. Okay. So at the time of implantation, the uterus is in the, so the implantation occurs either at the anterior wall or the posterior wall of the uterus. So the inner cell mass, okay, at the time of implantation, the uterus is in the secretive phase. Most of the time, it's welcoming a fetus or the egg, and the blastocyst glands in the endometrium of the, because the uterus has to be nourished. The uterus here, either here or here, it has to be nourished. The functional layer will start producing more cells, that's hyperplasia. Then glands will be formed, glycogen will be produced, and other minerals and other things will be produced to provide more red blood cells to be there enough. And the spiral arteries of the uterus or of the endometrium will form. More spiral arteries will form to provide oxygen or gaseous exchange. So you realize that more cells will be formed, more glands will be formed. So there will be glandular secretion, there will be glycogen secretion for nutrients, and a whole lot of things to support the conceptors or the blastocyst. Conceptors is the same as blastocyst. Conceptors. In other words, this is not, if it, after 2 months or from zygote to the second month or the end of 2 months, we form, after 2 months we form the fetus. But at this stage, after zygote formation, the conceptors and the rest, we say it is an embryo. So now we have an embryo, which after 2 months it will grow into a fetus. Okay, let's continue. If fertilization does not occur, then the menstrual phase begins. So if the egg gets to the endometrium and there is no, it doesn't get fertilized in the ampulla region, and the egg gets into the endometrium or the anterior posterior wall of the uterus, then the endometrium will be shed, and that is what you see in the monthly menstrual flow, because there was no fertilization, no egg, no zygote was implanted, no blastocyst was implanted in the endometrium. So the endometrium will be shed, and that is what you see in the menstrual flow. The main effects of segmentation are, or the division are, the distribution of the protoplasm of the zygote between the blastomeres. So the blastomeres, when they divide, there is distribution of the cytoplasm of protoplasm, the same as cytoplasm of the zygote. Increased mobility of original protoplasmic mass, facilitating morphogenetic and rearrangement movements in later development. So when the cells divide to the morula stage, the blastocyst stage, there is an increased mobility of original protoplasmic mass. So this one will facilitate genetic, morphological or genetic rearrangements. So if a baby will be a female, if it will be fair colored or dark colored, if you have the character of the father, the character of the mother, whatever abnormalities and the rest, they occur here. The compensation of the normal cell size of the species. So the cell size becomes normal also. So let's see the division. So we can see the 2 cell stages here, the 4 cell stage. And this division is by mitosis, equal division. So it started from a zygote, which is 1 cell, and that 1 cell divided into 2. Those 2 cells will divide into 4. The 4 cells, each of them will divide, making 8 cells. I'm seeing 9, it's supposed to be 8. Okay. Then we have 16 cells. The 8 cells will divide to 16. Then 16 will now divide into 32, and the 32 will now divide to whatever, 58 and the rest, and go on. So here I'm seeing different numbers, but the most important thing is that this is a blastocyst, and that is where we want to get to. So we have the inner cell mass, or the embryoblast, which produces the fetus, and the outer cell layer, which is called the trophoblast. which produces the placental membrane, the fetal membranes, or the placenta and the chorion. Formation of blastocyst. The progressive entry of fluid through the zona pellucida causes the morula to transform. So the zona pellucida, there will be from progressive inflow of fluid into the outer covering. This is what we call the zona pellucida. So there will be inflow of fluid inside it, and this one causes the morula to transform. The cells of the internal mass are displaced toward the periphery and are located near one of the poles of this spherical structure. So we have the animal pole, or the embryoblast, which leads to the formation of the human being. The cells of the external mass flatten while a fluid-filled cavity is created. Product of the confluence of the fluid-filled cavity of the intercellular spaces is called blastocyst. So this one is the blastocyst. This is a fluid-filled cavity. It contains fluid. It's called blastocyst, and this is the embryoblast, which leads to the fetus, and this is the trophoblast, which leads to the placenta and the chorion, or fetal membranes. Okay, so like I've explained, this is the blastocyst, the inner cell mass, the blastocyst. So the embryoblast is what I've shown you already. And some of these things are very important, but you will even forget it. So you just get this. This is the trophoblast, which leads to the fetal membrane production. And the trophoblast divides into cytotrophoblast and cytotrophoblast. And the trophoblast leads to the formation of placenta, chorion, and the other fetal membranes. Whereas the embryoblast is the fetus. This collection of compacted cells is the production of the fetus. It's called embryoblast. And this one is the blastocyst. The blastocyst contains fluid. It's a hollow space. That's all you need to understand. So you can see it over here. We have the embryoblast here. We have the blastocyst, that's the space or inner space filled with fluid. And the trophoblast is the outer cell mass, or the outer cell layer. Trophoblast. Okay, so another diagram is the same thing. Just know this. So this is you. This is you and I. This is how we started as a clot of blood. Okay, so we have another explanation. The first one, the zygote formation. After zygote, then the 2-cell stage, 4-cell stage. This is early morula, and the 16-cell stage, and the 32. So we have the blastocyst, the cavity covered with fluid, and the outer cell layer, and the inner cell mass, or the embryoblast. Okay, so let's continue. So implantation. This is how the blastocyst implants. At first, it attaches to the stroma, the spongy layer of the endometrium, or the functional layer. You know, the functional layer comprises of the spongy layer and also the compact layer. And the basal layer is the last layer. That one is what, if you go and do DNC, is it dilatation, curettage. If you do that, abortions, the doctors will be scraping the deciduous. They will scrape it. They will scrape the basal layer. Then you cannot have a baby, because the basal layer that regenerates the compact and the spongy layer of the endometrium. If the basal layer is not there, it cannot germinate. It cannot generate the compact and the spongy layer. And the compact and spongy layer together forms the functional layer of the endometrium. So you have to be aware, you have to be conscious of that. So during menstruation, it is the functional layer, which is a combination of the spongy and the compact layer, that is shed in the menstrual flow. So when they are shed, the basal layer has to now produce more, or have to regenerate the compact and the spongy layer. But if you do abortion and the basal layer is removed, then you cannot be even having menstruation and the rest. So that's about it. You have to be careful. Okay, so embryonic pole. This embryonic pole leads to the embryo and the blastocyst. You can now see the hollow cavity filled with fluid, and this is the trophoblast. You have the embryonic pole. We have the inner cell mass. The embryonic pole, that's the side of the embryo that attaches to the endometrial layer, and this is the blastocyst cavity. We have the endometrial epithelium, then the endometrial capillaries. There are a lot of capillaries in the endometrium to support the growing fetus, the growing embryo. Endometrial gland, there are glands also there to produce a whole lot of things, glycogen and the rest, to nourish the fetus. So the fetus has to, the blastocyst or the conceptors, these conceptors of life, has to eat a lot of food. And most of the time, let me tell you something, missed abortions or miscarriages happen in the first 3 months of gestation or first 3 months of pregnancy. Why? This is because, some of these developmental processes, if the mother is smoking, if the mother is drinking alcohol and the rest, this is the time that genetic recombination and other things happen. Genetic recombination and other events, most of the time they happen during this time. They happen during this time, the first 3 months. So at the first 3 months, all these things are occurring. The cells are dividing. The cells are divided. That's why we tell you that if you are pregnant, don't take alcohol, don't take other drugs and other things, because those things are teratogenic substances. They are called teratogenic substances. Teratogenic substances. They are teratogens. They are teratogenic. Substances. So those things are teratogenic substances. They are not good. They are not good, teratogenic substances. So they go to affect the fetus, or the embryo at this stage. So what happens is that now there will be congenital anomalies or malformations, congenital anomalies at this stage, at this early stage. There will be a lot of congenital anomalies, meaning that your fetus or your embryo will be abnormal. Some of them will end up being given birth, having horns on their head, horns. Some of them will end up coming with only one eye. One eye. Some of them will end up coming with only one ear. Or even if the ear is there, it's going to be anotia, absence of ear, or absence of ears, or microtia, very small ear. Microtia. Or syndactyly. Syndactyly. The digits of the fingers are more than 5. One finger alone will have extra digits. So one hand will have extra digital finger or extra digit of finger. So we'll have 6 fingers, like Goliath in the Bible. All this is because of how the mother did not take care of the pregnancy within the first 3 months. Some of them too, they are idiopathic factors. Some of them are idiopathic. You don't know where it's coming from. The person just started, just woke up one day, and things are happening in his body. Her body, she doesn't know. So they are idiopathic or unknown factors. Some of the menstruations are idiopathic or unknown factors. They don't know where it is coming from. So these things are very serious events. When a woman gets miscarriage, whether it's idiopathic or whether she used teratogenic substances or teratogens, alcohol is a teratogenic substance, weed is a teratogenic substance, drug abuse or some drugs. If you are pregnant, the only drug you can take is quinine. Quinine for malaria and cefurozine. You don't take any other drug. If you even take common malaria drug, it can abort your baby within the first 3 months. So you have to be careful. And the reason why abortion or miscarriage happens spontaneously is that maybe the child you are going to give birth to has 6 fingers, or it doesn't have a head, or the child has no legs. So some of them, nature has thought it wise to just eliminate such children. So nature has thought it wise to kill such children, or such embryos. Nature has thought it wise to eliminate such individuals before they are born. Because if you give birth to a baby and the baby does not have a head, you, the mother, you end up coming home yourself. Your husband will run away. Because how can you give birth to a baby without a head? A baby with a whole lot of congenital anomalies. You give birth to a baby without legs, without hands, without this. African man will run away and leave you in the hospital. So God thought it wise to eliminate such babies. That's why we have spontaneous miscarriages. It's not all the miscarriages that are demonic. So on the 6th day after the 6th day of fertilization, the blastocyst attaches to the endometrial epithelium, usually attachment to the embryonic pole. So this is the embryonic pole. The blastocyst goes deeper. It buries itself deeper into the uterine mucosa. So the whole of it comes to lie within the thickness of the endometrium. This is called interstitial implantation. So implantation is what we saw in the previous video I explained. So it buries itself in. So now it has attached. It will now enter the endometrium and bury itself inside. And it will be nourished by these blood vessels and these glands. So let's see a video on this.
Let's look at the events of second week of embryonic development. After a successful fertilization at day 7, the embryo is known as a blastocyst, which has 2 layers, the outer trophoblast and the inner cell mass, which has the stem cells. Now at day 8, the trophoblast is now subdivided into cytotrophoblast and the syncytiotrophoblast, and the inner cell mass further divides into epiblast and hypoblast. An amniotic cavity starts forming at this particular day. Also at day 10, you can find a primitive yolk sac which is forming. At this time, lacunar networks start to form. At day 12, the implantation is kind of complete and the lacunar network is now developing and forming connection between the mother and the embryo. And this is how the second week is done. Subscribe for more.
Let's watch our second video on this.
Welcome to the Developmental Biology playlist. In this video, we are going to look at the second week of embryonic development in humans. We are going to focus on the key events that happens in the second week. And the first and foremost event that happens in the second week is the implantation of the blastocyst. Before jumping into details, let us recap what happened in the first week of embryonic development. Everything started with the fertilization event, which leads to the production of zygote. Zygote divides and forms 2-cell stage, 4-cell stage, 8-cell stage. Eventually it becomes the morula, which has a mulberry-like appearance and has 16 blastomeres approximately. Eventually the morula would give rise to blastocyst, and this uterine cavity, and ultimately it would attach to the uterine wall. At this point of time, blastocyst has two different cellular organizations. The outer layer is known as trophoblast, the inner layer is known as embryoblast, which has another name known as inner cell mass. The cells of the inner cell mass are actually pluripotent stem cells. That means it can give rise to different cell types. Eventually, the inner cell mass would become the embryo. Now, at day 8, trophoblast, which was the outer layer, further differentiates. Now it becomes cytotrophoblast and the syncytiotrophoblast. Cytotrophoblast cells play important role in terms of embedding the embryo in the uterus. The cytotrophoblast is also considered to be stem cells.
So this is a
They can
cytotrophoblast.
diversify into different
Look at the color.
phases, like fusion
And this is the
phases, like
syncytiotrophoblast.
invasive
This is the
lineage.
syncytiotrophoblast.
It's also important
So
to
look at the color
understand that
over here.
cytotrophoblast cells fuse with each other and form the syncytiotrophoblast. Syncytiotrophoblast are really important in terms of maternal gas exchange, nutrient exchange, and immunological and metabolic
So
functions.
this is the syncytiotrophoblast for
It's the
gas.
syncytiotrophoblast.
So this is the syncytiotrophoblast for gas exchange. That is what contacts the mother, or that is what is in contact and leads to the development of the placenta and the rest. So it's in direct contact with the mother. So that's where gas exchange, antibodies are exchanged between the fetus and the embryo and the mother, and a whole lot of waste removal. Everything takes place in the syncytiotrophoblast. You see, it's one cell. It's one cell. So it's a one cell, but the cytotrophoblast is multiple number of cells, many cells. But this one is just one cell, unicellular, and that is what enters the endometrium, makes hole inside, contacts the mother, and gets nutrients and nourishment for the blastocyst. So let's continue.
That creates the first connection between the mother and the developing embryo before even formation of the placenta. At day 8, the inner cell mass also diversified, and now it's known as the bilaminar embryonic disc. It has two layers. One, the hypoblast. The second is the epiblast.
Okay, so the bilaminar disc, but it is very important. This is the hypoblast. You can see the color, hypoblast. This is the epiblast. You can see the color. These two layers is what we call the bilaminar disc. So the bilaminar disc has started forming. So we are going to have, and this is the amniotic cavity, and this is the yolk sac. And they are all filled with fluid, and this is the amnion. So you see all this in the bilaminar disc is very, very important. Then after the bilaminar, you go to gastrulation, which is the germ layers, the 3 germ layers leading to the formation of organs. So we are now starting to form the bilaminar disc in week 2.
Hypoblast is comprising of cells which are cuboidal in nature, and inside the epiblast the amniotic cavities start forming. The epiblast cells are columnar in nature, whereas hypoblast cells are cuboidal in nature. At day 8, we can appreciate.
So those who did histology, if you did histology, the hypoblast cells are cuboidal. They are like cube of sugar. Cube. Then the epiblast cells are epiblast because they are up. Then hypoblast is down. Hypo means that down. Whenever you say hypo, it's low. So hypo is down. Then epi is high. So you can see these ones are columnar cells. Columnar cells produce a whole lot of mucus and glandular secretions. They are long cylindrical cells, long, but cuboidal cells like a cube of sugar. So look at the cell morphology.
Heterogeneity starts appearing from the heterogeneity forming. Now at day 10, there are further development. Cells of the hypoblast move and migrate. It forms the primitive yolk sac. Also, lacuna starts appearing in the syncytial trophoblast.
So this is the primitive yolk sac. So the cells of the hypoblast now have to move around and form a cavity. And inside the cavity is the primitive yolk sac. Primitive means that old. Whenever you hear primitive, it's old, old-fashioned, very old or crude. So this is the yolk sac, and this is the amniotic cavity. Then this is the syncytial trophoblast now leads to formation of what? Lacuna system. Lacuna is what? Holes or cavities suddenly appears in the syncytial trophoblast, and this leads to this leads to puncturing of maternal blood, which drains into the lacuna system, and the lacuna system now nourish the conceptors or the blastocyst or the clot of blood, which will now grow into a human being.
Now this lacuna would eventually form an intricate network known as a lacunar network. By the end of day 10, we can completely understand the blastocyst has embedded completely in the endometrium. The cytotrophoblast secretes specific proteolytic enzymes that break down the extracellular matrix of the endometrium and allow the embryo to burrow deep inside the endometrium. Now projections of the syncytial trophoblast pull the embryo inside the endometrium until and unless it is fully covered with the endometrial epithelium. This snapshot shows you that how the...
So I've already explained this. It has attached the endometrium. Now it's entering the endometrium. Now it has burrowed inside or entered totally the endometrial layer of the uterus or the womb. So now the uterus, the endometrium will nourish it so that this clot of blood or these cells or blastocysts or conceptors will grow. And this is a growing human being.
Embryo is burrowing deep in the endometrium by the day 10. At day 12, further development happens. The lacunar networks or lacuna becomes more prominent, and it invades the maternal sinusoids. Now it ruptures the maternal sinusoids that leads to the blood connection.
So you can see maternal sinusoids or maternal blood cells are being punctured by the syncytial trophoblast. So the lacunar system now, since the blood vessels, these cells are blood vessels. So when these blood vessels are punctured, blood moves into these lacuna or holes or cavities and fill them up so that there can be gaseous exchange, nutrient exchange, waste disposal exchange between the mother and the fetus or the embryo.
Between the embryo and the mother. So this is the first time when maternal blood is connecting with the embryo. Now inside the cytotrophoblast and outside the hypoblast, there is formation of the extra embryonic mesoderm. Slit appears in this extra embryonic mesoderm eventually, and it ultimately forms the chorionic cavity.
So the extra embryonic mesoderm leads to the formation of the chorionic cavity. So you can see this is the amniotic cavity, yolk sac or yolk sac cavity, and the chorionic cavity comes around it. Then the chorionic cavity will end up in producing the umbilical cord. So that is why we are doing it.
And there is a portion of extra embryonic mesoderm that holds the inner part of the embryo, and this is known as the primitive stalk, which is otherwise known as the future umbilical cord. So in this video, we can appreciate how the developing blastocyst has implanted in the endometrium, and slightly it has grown in size and intricate lacunar network has formed. That means the connection between mother and the embryo has been established by the second week of development. Nutrient exchange, gas exchange, everything has started by this time point. In subsequent videos, we'll look at how gastrulation process occurs.
Okay, so we can see the blastocyst entering the endometrium, as I've explained. First one, it was attached. Here it was attached. It was attached to the endometrium. Now it has entered the endometrium. Now it has totally entered the endometrium with a closing plug around here. And the endometrium has closed up around here. You can see the lacunar system which contains blood to nourish the blastocyst. You can see the network of endometrial capillaries. You can see the glands, the amniotic cavity, the amnion which produces the amniotic fluid, and we have the cytotrophoblast and the epiblast and the hypoblast are there. Okay, so let's go to another video. So the normal implantation sites of the uterus, we have this is the posterior wall of the uterus. Like I explained earlier on, we have the anterior wall. If it is the anterior wall, then the urinary bladder will be around here. If it's the posterior wall, you will see the rectum attached or adjacent to it. So we can see this is the posterior wall, so rectum will be here, because your back contains your anus and your rectum, but your front contains the urinary bladder. Your pubic symphysis, your genitals, is in front of you. So if the placenta is attached over here, then we can say that the baby or the fetus is attached at the anterior wall of the womb or the uterus. If it attached the posterior wall, this picture shows posterior wall attachment of the uterus. So we can see the umbilical cord, the posterior wall attachment of the placenta. The umbilical cord comes to connect the placenta, this placenta, to the umbilicus or the navel of the fetus. Okay, so pregnancy test, the women know it. This is the hormone, human chorionic gonadotrophic hormone that we use to test, and this is a direct ELISA method. We test it using the direct ELISA. Direct ELISA, that's enzyme linked immunosorbent assay. Direct ELISA method. We have the direct ELISA. We also have the competitive ELISA. Competitive ELISA. We have the indirect ELISA. And we have the sandwich ELISA. So we have 4 types of ELISA: direct, indirect, and sandwich, competitive and sandwich ELISA. An ELISA test is just for us to be able to measure the concentration and enzyme activity of a protein. So you can see this is direct ELISA test, and it is qualitative test because we want positive or negative. Is it there? It's not there. But if you use the ELISA method, you are not going to quantify the hormones that are there. But this is direct, positive and negative. Okay. But if it's so for this is qualitative, but if it's quantitative ELISA, then that one we have to measure the total concentration of this human chorionic gonadotrophic hormone. So the implantation process continues. On the 8th day, beta HCG can be detected. The implantation increases the synthesis of HCG so that it can be found first in the maternal blood. So after the implantation, that we can measure the beta HCG in the maternal blood. So we can find this hormone to be positive or increased in the maternal blood first, before it can be found later in the urine. So it occurs in the maternal blood before later it can be found in the urine. So women, if you don't see it, if your urine is showing negative, go use your blood and you will find it. At 8 days, the blastocyst is partially included in the endometrial stroma. The trophoblast of the embryoblast zone, as it penetrates, differentiates into. So the trophoblast produces cytotrophoblast and cytotrophoblast. And like I said, the trophoblast leads to the production of fetal membranes like the placenta and the chorion. Cells from the cytotrophoblast migrate to the cytotrophoblast and fuse to form a syncytium. So this is the syncytium. The syncytium. Yeah, they're in the videos. So the syncytium. Okay, so this is a syncytium. Syncytiotropoblast. This is a syncytium. Okay. And so I recap. This is the syncytiotropoblast, and this is the cytotrophoblast. And this is the epiblast, hypoblast, epiblast. Yolk sac, amniotic cavity. You have to know this. So cells from the cytotrophoblast migrate to the syncytiotropoblast and fuse to form a syncytium. Embryoblast cells differentiate into two layers: hypoblast, that is the lower, and the epiblast, that is the above. So I show you that the hypoblast, we have the hypoblast and the epiblast. So this is the hypoblast. Hypoblast. So we have the hypoblast. This is the epiblast, that's the up. Then the hypoblast is down. So we see more images. The hypoblast and the epiblast together form the bilaminar embryonic disc. So like I said, you saw in the video, the hypoblast and the epiblast form the bilaminar embryonic disc. Inside the epiblast, the cavity expands and forms the amniotic cavity. So you can see this is the amniotic cavity. There is a cavity here. The amnion gives us a cavity called amniotic cavity. And this is the primitive or primary yolk sac. Okay. The surrounding epiblast cells are called amnoblast. I've shown you. The endometrial stroma adjacent to the implantation site appears edematous and vascularized. It is edematous and vascular because it has a lot of glandular secretions, glycogen secretions, and is vascularized, a lot of blood vessels to nourish the conceptors. The glands are enlarged and tortuous and secrete copious amounts of glycogen and mucus to support, give energy and nutrient to the conceptors. So you can see this is the amnion. Amnion is a thin membrane and it secretes the amniotic fluid. And this is the amniotic cavity, contains the amniotic fluid. And the amniotic fluid, most of the time when we are doing scan, ultrasonography, we look for the amniotic fluid index, or we call it AFI. AFI. We look for AFI or maximum vertical pocket. Maximum vertical pocket. Maximum vertical pocket. We look for AFI, amniotic fluid index. Amniotic fluid. AFI is amniotic fluid. Amniotic fluid index. We look for AFI or amniotic fluid index. Yes, this is what we do. And this, if the amniotic fluid is the fluid which the fetus the fetus urinates into the amniotic fluid. It urinates. So the fetal urine forms the amniotic fluid. It urinates into the amniotic cavity, and the fetal urine forms the amniotic fluid. And the amniotic fluid, the fetus urinates inside it, and at the same time drinks it. It will drink it and also urinate it. It will drink it and urinate, and the amniotic fluid has a lot of waste products there. So the fetus will drink it and urinate it, and by so doing it's cleansing its system. So when the amniotic fluid is low in concentration or low in volume, then we say that there is something we call respiratory distress can set in. A whole lot of congenital anomalies of the fetus can set in, because and so we have a condition called oligohydramnios. That is, if you go and do a scan and they say there is oligohydramnios, meaning that your amniotic fluid, the amniotic fluid of the fetus, is less or small. If it is polyhydramnios, that one too is not good. Polyhydramnios, too much of amniotic fluid is called polyhydramnios, and this one means that the baby can be having hypertension. Maybe if the mother has hypertension, we have something we call hypertensive disorders of pregnancy, hypertensive, high blood pressure, hypertensive disorders of pregnancy. So hypertensive disorders of pregnancy can lead to oligohydramnios. It can lead to polyhydramnios, too much of amniotic fluid, and it's not good. Hypertensive disorders of pregnancy, that's if the mother has hypertension during pregnancy, then the fetus can have polyhydramnios, too much amniotic fluid, and it's not good. It will not augur well for the baby. It will not augur well for the fetus. Then if the mother also have diabetes mellitus or gestational diabetes, that one too is not good. If the mother has diabetes of the mother, or gestational diabetes associated with what? Pregnancy, it can lead to polyhydramnios, which is also not good. So what we need is a normal hydramnios, normal amniotic fluid index, normal AFI, normal amniotic fluid index, or ASI. AFI is what we require in the normal pregnancy. Okay, so we can see over here evolution of the embryoblast and the trophoblast. So this is the embryo. This is the yolk sac. This is the amnion, and this is the amniotic cavity. This is an ultrasound presentation at week 7. And you have to be guided that the first organ that occurs in an embryo is the fetal heart. The fetal heart is the first organ that shows. So the fetal heart. So whenever you want to see whether your 2 weeks or your 3 weeks or 5 weeks pregnancy, whether the fetus is alive or not, you just check the fetal heart. That's the first organ that appears, the heart, and it appears on the 3rd week up to the 7th week. By the 7th week, all the 4 chambers of the heart can now show on ultrasound. So you can see the fetal. So the fetal heart will show whether this embryo is alive or dead. So we can see this is the epiblast, this is the hypoblast. The yellow is the hypoblast. You can see the blastocele, the cytotrophoblast. You can also see the uterine glands, a lot of glands and blood vessels in the endometrium. You can see the amniotic cavity. You can also see the amnioblast, the cells that produce the amniotic fluid. Okay, so let's go. Okay, so evolution. So we can see, let's see the epiblast. Well, this is the epiblast. You can see the columnar epithelial cells or the columnar cells. Then you can see the cuboidal cells of the hypoblast. You can see the exocoelomic cavity or primitive yolk sac. You can also see the amniotic cavity. You can also see the lacuna or blood vessels, the trophoblastic lacuna, that's the blood vessels, lacuna, the holes, and the blood vessels will be punctured and fill this lacuna system. This white thing is the lacuna system. There are holes or cavities that this blood will drain into, and it will nourish the conceptors. And this whole structure is the conceptors. We have the cytotrophoblast, and the green thing with the lacuna system is the syncytial trophoblast. And we have the amniotic cavity that the baby would be drinking and urinating and defecating inside at the same time. And yes, so we also have the exocoelomic space that will lead to the formation of the umbilical cord. Okay, so let's pause the video here and continue at another time.